Okay, so this is the intake air control valve off a 1997 Honda Civic DX with the 5-speed manual transmission. And I'm going to show you later I'm going to show you how to get this thing off of the throttle body. But we took this off, and one thing that you'll find is that this little shutter was actually stuck in the closed position, and there was a lot of corrosion in here. Um, and it's not unusual that you're going to see that in there because this is the coolant coming right off the cooling system on the radiator. So what you want to do is you want to clean this out so that this little shutter can actually rotate freely into position. And I got it kind of freed up. I just took a pair of pliers. There's a little magnet here. As long as you have some soft jaw pliers, you might want to put a wrap of tape around there. You can actually free it usually just by putting some pressure on it and just going both ways. But it's actually not rotating as freely as it should. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use a little bit of a weak acid here. And what I have is I have some lemon juice. So I'm going to pour a little bit of lemon juice right into the opening there. I'm just going to let it sit in there for a second. And I'm just going to rotate by hand this little shutter. And already it's moving. See that? Isn't that amazing? So this is a way you can actually clean the corrosion out of this section of the intake air control valve. And you don't have to go out and buy one. You see right now you're finding these on the internet for anywhere from about $50 to $100. The dealer is going to charge you hundreds of dollars for a new one of these things when all you have to do is spend a little time taking it off your throttle body and then you're cleaning it out. So I'm just going to rotate this a little bit. It's already getting to the point where I can move it just with a very little finger pressure. So I'm going to dump it out now. Just pour it in the sink, this regular lemon juice. I'm going to give it a rinse under some tap water. Look at that. Barely any pressure at all needed to rotate that little shutter there. So this is as good as new, and we're going to put it right back on the engine, and you're going to see it work. Okay, so we have taken and cleaned our intake air control valve. And it's now reinstalled back on the throttle body. And you probably have seen other places on the internet. For this particular throttle body and this particular model year, this is a 97 DX with the 5-speed manual transmission. It's really, you really do have to take the throttle body off in order to take off the intake air control valve. You'll never get to these little screws right here with enough force. So you're going to take this thing off. So back installed, we're going to just drop the throttle body back onto the top of the intake manifold. And there's 2 studs there and then a couple of bolts. So let me get those. Oops, those aren't done. All right, so the bolts go right into these 2 holes right here. And the nuts go on top of these studs. And the main thing when you're doing these is you want to make absolutely sure that you finger start them so that you're not cross-threading these things, because that's the last thing you want to do is cross-thread a bolt or a nut onto a stud. You'll be in a world of hurt if you do that. And so for those of you who are relatively new mechanics, make sure when you've got a cross pattern like this that you always tighten your bolts down across from each other so that you're getting nice even pressure. There's a gasket between the throttle body and the intake manifold, and if it's in good shape you can go ahead and reuse it. I just cleaned some of the carbon off of the area where the ports bring the fuel and the air mix. It was a little bit dirty. And these just have to be nice and snug. Don't go crazy though, because you don't want to shear one of these things off. And that's nice and tight on there. So we have a completely re-cleaned intake air control valve. We took the opportunity to thoroughly clean the throttle body, the gasket, the inside of the throat, and so now we can hook up all the sensors and the throttle cable. So now we're going to remember to reattach the coolant lines to the intake air control valve. And you also see in some of the other videos out there that some some coolant comes out. It's not a big deal if you're doing this outside. You just want to push these things on there so they're snug. It helps if you have smaller hands, because these lines are kind of tough to get back on there. There we go, that one popped on okay. And bring them up tight to the body. And then you're gonna take these hose clamps, and I actually like to use a pair of pliers. So you can reach in there and you can pinch these things nice and easily and bring them up. So you're making sure that you're clamping down between the hose and the little stub out there. Do the same thing for the top. Alright, those are nice and snug. Now I took off the throttle cable in order to give myself some clearance so I could get at all that stuff. So now we're going to reattach the throttle cable to the intake manifold where it bolts on. So the way you reattach the throttle cable here is, you see this little barrel end is actually molded right onto the end of the stainless steel cable. And there's a little slot down here. If you want to, you can rotate it in position, but what you want to do is you want to thread that barrel in there with the little slot opening, and that way you'll push the cable into the groove, and then you'll wrap it all the way up and around like that, and then that'll allow you to position the this cable bracket, this throttle cable bracket in position, and then we'll get the bolts and we'll bolt that back on. So these bolts that hold this thing on are 10mm bolts, and so again I like to thread them by finger to get them started, make sure I'm not going to cross thread. There's one. And there's the other. Spin them down nice and fast just by using your extender. The 10mm socket on there. And then just snug them up. And again, whenever you're tightening a steel bolt into an aluminum molded piece, you don't want to use too much tension. In a perfect world, you'd be using a torque wrench here to do this, but once you've had enough experience bolting these things on, you just need to kind of bring them up nice and snug, and then maybe just 1/8 of a turn. And then this little guy just snaps back in here to this bracket. And our throttle body is all almost back together here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my sensors and plug them back in, and I'm going to start with the intake air control valve. And that's this one down here. And I've already taken a look at them. They're all nice and clean and dry, so I don't have to worry about that. They should just snap back into place. Here's our manifold air pressure sensor. And then this one right here we're going to do last. This is the intake air temperature sensor. So we're going to do that after we put the air case back on, the air filter case back on. Alright, so this is kind of one of the toughest parts of this job. This is a kind of a poor design in the case of this particular engine. And what's happened is you've got this band clamp down underneath here on the filter case. And it's just a little 8mm bolt, but it's really out of the way. You're going to see when I put this thing back on there how hard it is to get at this thing with even a socket extender, because you just can't see it. So I'll show you how I did it, and then maybe you'll have some success there. But it's a friction fit, and you're just going to set this body right, center it, because what you're going to want to have happen is you're going to have this little anti-vibration bushing. It's going to want to line up with that. So we're going to take it and we're going to set it right on there, and we're just going to push down, make sure that this little pipe is out of the way. And what I might do is actually put a little bit of grease on there as a lube. So I'm going to pull this back off for a second. So I've got some premium grease here, synthetic grease, and it shouldn't do any real damage to the rubber. This is actually formulated to be pretty benign to any kind of contact with rubber and plastic. I'm just going to swipe it around on the inside here. And this should help me get this gasket back on the top of the throttle body. So let's try it again. And this bracket's nice and loose. I backed off the screw quite a ways, and so you should just be able to push down. Look at that piece of cake. Who knew? All right, so now I'm gonna show you how I got to that that clamp bolt. Using a little hand mirror right here just to help show you and visualize where that is. It's kind of even complicates it because remember this is a mirror image, but what it helped me do was see where that little 8mm bolt was, and then I'm gonna take my extension with my 8mm socket, and you can actually reach underneath there and kind of fiddle around with it, and it'll get on there, and you can bring it up nice and tight with an extender. This is probably about 3.5 inches long, so let me see if I can reach under and grab it. It's going to take a little bit of fiddling. There, I got it. And now I'm just going to bring it up nice and tight here. My fingers. And I'm going to have my lovely assistant go and get my ratchet in just a second. Alright, so that's finger tight. And then you just snap the rest of your on there. So once you know where it is, once you've used that little mirror to help you see it, you can reach in there with this extension and find it pretty easily. And so here I am just bringing up tension on it now. And again, because this is rubber, you don't want to go crazy here. It just has to make a nice snug friction fit. So that's it right there. And that sucker is on there again, just like it was before. All right, so we've got our lower air filter body back on there, nice and snug. Now we're going to reconnect this breather tube right to the top of it and push that on there nice and snug. And then it's got two rubber tube clamps on there. So whether you use pliers or you just use your fingers, just push them back on. There's one. Oh, that's a killer. I need my pliers. There they are. And just seat that right back on there. That's not going anywhere. Then you take your filter and you set it in there. And then we just had this guy tucked out of the way. So we swing it back over. And you want to be a little careful when you're placing this. I've actually seen people do this and then trap part of the filter element back into place. And it's a simple matter of just flipping these little clamps back up. Alright, and then last but not least, we've got this intake air sensor. And the one thing that confuses a lot of people is there's actually two little ways that this thing mounts on here. There's this little clip that you got to pinch together to get it out. It's funny because earlier when I was tugging on the lower body trying to get off, I'd forgotten to take this little clip out, and it was the one thing that was holding in place. So it comes in from underneath and you just push up and it should snap into position. And then last but not least, you go ahead and reconnect your intake air. So we're also going to replace this 8mm bolt. It goes through this anti-vibration bushing that holds the lower air filter body in position. So again, we're just going to finger start that. Make sure you've got the washer in place. And then just take your extension. Bring it up tight. Come on. And just a couple of quarter turns to snug it up. All right, that guy's not going anywhere. So the engine's cold. Remember, we've had the throttle body off of there, and we had the intake air control valve off of there. So some coolant drained out, and that means there's some air in the system right now. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make sure that the air comes out. And one way to do that is to take off your radiator cap. And you don't want to do this when it's hot, of course, because that's going to mean you're going to get scalded potentially. And we're going to want the bubbles to come out. There's actually a funnel you can use that fits into the opening here that allows you to keep a reservoir of coolant mix on top. So the bubbles will come out, and you have the ability to have that expansion going in and out without having to worry about bubbles being re-entrained into the system. Alright, so the moment of truth here is we started it up fine. It never had a cold idle problem. This was actually a problem only when we had the coolant all warmed up and the engine warm. And so we're going to get it up to temperature again the same way. We've turned the heater on all the way, the slider all the way over to hot, and we've turned the fan off. And that's going to allow coolant to circulate through the entire system. And hopefully that's going to push some of those bubbles out. But what you really want to do is wait until the fan has gone on the radiator at least once, and that means the engine's up to temp. So we're going to wait for that. So the repair was a complete success. This engine is idling perfectly at warm idle, right around 500 to 700 RPM. I forget what the actual set point is. It's not that difficult a job once you break it down like that, and I'm glad I could have been of service, and hopefully you Shade Tree mechanics, you men and women that love to work on your cars, can do this job yourselves when you need to and save yourself up to $1,000 or more depending. Feel free to ask me any questions, and I'll try to get back to them as soon as I can, and thanks for watching.